United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George.
Hip, hip!
The world watched as King Charles III ascended the throne, but a quieter legal shift regarding Prince Edward is now stealing the spotlight. While Charles inherited the crown, the specifics of the late Queen's private estate and the Duke of Edinburgh's legacy have sparked intense discussion among royal legal teams. It isn't just about a title, it's about the distribution of assets and a strategic move that many didn't see coming until now. This is the reality behind the family's changing dynamic. But did this shift happen by chance? Or was it a plan set in motion decades ago? The Edinburgh succession. The transition of the Duke of Edinburgh title from Prince Philip to Prince Edward represents one of the most complex chapters in modern royal protocol, involving a delicate dance between historical promise and contemporary legal pragmatism. Why has this caused such a stir within the legal circles of the House of Windsor? One must look back to the summer of 1999. When Prince Edward married Sophie Rhys-Jones, Buckingham Palace took the unusual step of issuing a statement declaring that the Queen, Prince Philip, and the then Prince Charles had all agreed that Edward should eventually inherit his father's title. This was a significant departure from tradition, as such titles usually pass automatically to the eldest son. However, the legal mechanics of the British peerage are rarely as simple as a verbal agreement or a press release. When Prince Philip passed away in April 2021, the title of Duke of Edinburgh did not immediately jump to Edward. Under the standard laws of primogeniture, the title was inherited by Prince Philip's firstborn son, Charles. For nearly 2 years, Charles held the title while also being the Prince of Wales. This created a period of profound uncertainty. Legal analysts and royal commentators began to question whether the 1999 promise would be honored. The tension grew when Charles ascended to the throne in September 2022. At that moment, the Edinburgh title merged with the crown. Effectively, it ceased to exist as a separate entity and returned to the pool of titles that the king has the power to grant. The delay in reissuing the title to Edward became a focal point for those studying the king's slimmed-down monarchy. Lawyers for the crown were tasked with reconciling a decades-old family pact with a new sovereign's desire to reduce the number of hereditary titles that could potentially burden the taxpayer or complicate the royal hierarchy in future generations. This wasn't just a matter of family sentiment, it was a constitutional puzzle. If Charles granted the title to Edward as a traditional hereditary dukedom, it would eventually pass to Edward's son, James. Over several generations, the title would move further away from the immediate line of succession, creating a branch of minor royals with major titles, a scenario Charles was reportedly keen to avoid. The resolution reached in March 2023 was a masterclass in legal compromise. On Edward's 59th birthday, the king finally bestowed the title upon him, but with a massive catch. It was created as a life peerage. This means the title belongs to Edward for the duration of his life only. Upon his death, it will not pass to James, Earl of Wessex, but will instead revert to the crown once again. This specific legal structure allows Charles to honor his parents' wishes while simultaneously ensuring the title remains under the control of the reigning monarch. For Edward, it was a bittersweet victory. He secured the legacy he had prepared for since his 30s, yet he had to accept a version of that legacy that ends with him. Within the palace, this move was seen as a significant assertion of Charles's authority. It signaled to the rest of the family that the king's vision for a streamlined firm would take precedence over long-standing expectations. The legal paperwork required to facilitate a life peerage for a royal dukedom is rare and highly specific, requiring a new set of letters patent. This document effectively rewrote Edward's future. While the public saw a celebratory announcement, the lawyers saw a tactical maneuver that effectively pruned a branch of the family tree while appearing to nourish it. This strategic distribution of titles and the associated status is the first clear indication of how Charles intends to manage his siblings' roles and their expectations moving forward. The complexities of the Edinburgh title, however, are only the tip of the iceberg. While titles bring prestige and specific duties, they do not always come with the liquid assets or land holdings that a prince might require to maintain such a high-profile existence. As Edward stepped into this new role, the focus of the legal teams shifted from the intangible honor of a name to the very tangible reality of the Queen's private wealth. If the king holds the keys to the kingdom, who holds the rights to the private treasures hidden within the Queen's secret will? The sovereign's private will. The true engine of royal wealth is not the public sovereign grant, but the opaque private estate of the monarch, a collection of assets that has remained largely invisible to the public eye for centuries. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, she left behind an estate valued in the hundreds of millions, including the sprawling Sandringham and Balmoral estates. Unlike the Crown Estate, which is held in trust for the nation, these properties are the personal possessions of the sovereign. This distinction is where the legal discussions regarding Prince Edward's inheritance become significantly more complex. For decades, it was assumed that King Charles would simply absorb these assets as part of the Crown's continuity. However, the legal reality of the Queen's private will has introduced a layer of nuance that few outside the palace walls expected.
For the simple reason that the Queen's will remain confidential. We are likely never going to know the details of the Queen's will because it will remain confidential.
Under an agreement reached in 1993 between the Queen and then Prime Minister John Major, assets passing from one sovereign to their successor are exempt from the standard 40% inheritance tax. This agreement was designed to prevent the salami slicing of the monarchy's assets through generational taxation, ensuring the firm remains financially independent and capable of maintaining its historic properties. While this protects the bulk of the estate as it passes to Charles, it does not strictly prohibit the Queen from making private bequests to her other children. Herein lies the focus for Edward's legal representatives, identifying the specific provisions made by the late Queen to ensure her younger children were not left entirely dependent on the King's discretion. While the King inherited the primary land holdings, there is a precedent for the monarch to delegate the stewardship and income of specific portions of these private estates to siblings who are actively serving the Crown. Prince Edward and his wife, Sophie, have become two of the most hard-working members of the royal family, filling the void left by the departure of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and the stepping back of Prince Andrew. This increased workload has necessitated a more robust financial foundation. Legal discussions have centered on whether the Queen's private will included specific trusts or life interest clauses that grant Edward the rights to certain revenues from the private estates, assets that Charles might have otherwise integrated into his broader royal restructuring plan. Furthermore, the legal status of the Queen's will itself adds a layer of mystery. In the United Kingdom, the wills of senior royals are traditionally sealed for 90 years to protect the privacy of the sovereign and their family. This means that the exact details of what Edward legally inherits may never be fully disclosed to the public, even as the effects of those bequests become visible in his lifestyle and official capacity. The confirmation by lawyers that Edward's position is legally secured suggests that the Queen took proactive steps to shield her youngest son from the potential financial pruning associated with Charles's slimmed-down monarchy. It is a strategic check and balance system, ensuring that while Charles holds the power of the throne, the legacy of the Queen's private fortune provides a safety net for those who remain loyal to the firm's mission. This arrangement effectively creates two parallel paths of inheritance: the public, state-sanctioned transition of the crown, and the private, family-oriented distribution of wealth. For Edward, the shock to the system wasn't a sudden legal battle, but the realization that his mother had meticulously documented his future security in a way that even the king cannot easily override. As these private trusts begin to activate, the financial independence of the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh becomes a key factor in the stability of the modern monarchy. This isn't just about money, it's about the legal right to a seat at the table in a family where status and solvency are inextricably linked. If the king holds the keys to the kingdom, who holds the rights to the private treasures hidden within the Queen's secret will? The Crown Estate versus the Duchy. To fully grasp the magnitude of the legal confirmation regarding Prince Edward's inheritance, one must navigate the labyrinthine financial structures that underpin the British monarchy. The surprise within the palace does not stem from a simple cash transfer, but from a fundamental clarification of which assets belong to the state and which belong to the family. In the United Kingdom, royal wealth is divided into three distinct pillars: the Crown Estate, the Duchy of Lancaster, and the private holdings of the monarch. For years, it was widely assumed that King Charles III would consolidate control over the Duchy of Lancaster, a vast portfolio of land and assets worth over £650 million, to fund his vision of a streamlined monarchy. However, legal representatives for the Duke of Edinburgh have recently underscored a crucial distinction that alters this narrative. The Crown Estate is a massive £16 billion collection of lands and holdings, including nearly the entire UK seabed and vast swaths of central London. While the king is the legal owner in right of the crown, he does not manage it, nor does he keep its profits. Instead, these revenues flow to the treasury, which then grants a percentage back to the royals via the sovereign grant. In 2026, this grant is projected to hit a record £137.9 million. However, this money is strictly for official duties, travel, staff, and palace maintenance. It does not provide the private wealth that siblings like Edward need for long-term family security. This is where the Duchy of Lancaster and the Queen's private estate come into play. Charles has long claimed that the privy purse, the income from the Duchy of Lancaster, was his primary instrument for funding working royals. But Edward's lawyers have highlighted that specific trusts established by the late Queen were designed to bypass the king's discretionary control, ensuring Edward receives a direct share of income that Charles had previously signaled would be under his exclusive stewardship. This legal maneuver creates a firewall between the king's executive power and Edward's financial independence. For years, the public narrative suggested that Charles would have the final say on the allowances of his siblings, effectively making them employees of his new regime. By confirming Edward's direct inheritance of specific income-generating assets, previously thought to be absorbed by the duchy for general royal use, lawyers have effectively decoupled Edward from Charles's financial oversight. This is a significant blow to the slimmed-down philosophy, which relies on the king holding the purse strings to dictate who remains a working royal and who is relegated to the sidelines. The tension lies in the fact that while the king manages the Duchy of Lancaster, he does so as a trustee for future generations. Edward's legal team has successfully argued that certain legacies from Queen Elizabeth were intended as irrevocable settlements. These are legal arrangements that cannot be overturned by the sitting monarch, regardless of his desire to consolidate funds. This ensures that Edward and his family maintain a lifestyle befitting their rank without being subject to the political or personal whims of the reigning sovereign. It is a subtle but powerful assertion of sibling rights over crown authority, proving that even within a monarchy, the rule of law can provide a check on the king's ambitions. With the lines between public duty and private wealth blurring, where does the law end and family loyalty begin? The slimmed-down friction. The legal confirmation of Prince Edward's inheritance arrives at a pivotal moment in the reign of King Charles, serving as a friction point against his long-held vision for a slimmed-down monarchy. For decades, Charles has championed the idea of a core team of senior royals, primarily consisting of the sovereign, their spouse, and the direct line of succession. This strategy was designed to ensure the monarchy's survival in an era of increased public scrutiny and economic hardship by reducing the number of working royals supported by the state. However, the reality of 2026 has exposed a significant flaw in this plan. The core team is smaller than ever due to the departure of the Sussexes and the permanent removal of Prince Andrew from public life. This vacuum has made Prince Edward and the Duchess of Edinburgh not just useful, but indispensable. Lawyers close to the estate have revealed that this necessity has shifted the leverage within the family. While Charles initially sought to centralize financial control, effectively placing his siblings on a discretionary allowance, the legal work behind Edward's inheritance suggests a much firmer boundary was drawn. As Edward took on a record-breaking number of engagements throughout 2024 and 2025 to cover for the King and the Princess of Wales during their respective health challenges, the argument for his financial independence became undeniable. The friction arises from the fact that Edward is no longer a dependent junior royal. He has become a foundational pillar of the firm. Consequently, His legal team has worked to ensure his compensation and inheritance are reflective of this senior status, rather than the minor status Charles's original plan might have dictated. Furthermore, this internal tension is exacerbated by the king's move to revoke the styles and titles of other family members, most notably Andrew. By initiating the formal process to remove Andrew's Royal Highness status and peerage privileges in late 2025, Charles signaled a ruthless adherence to his streamlining goal. Yet, in the same breath, he was forced to elevate Edward to the Dukedom of Edinburgh. This creates a legal paradox. While one brother is stripped of his identity to save the monarchy's reputation, the other must be legally fortified to save its operations. Edward's lawyers have expertly navigated this environment, securing assets that Charles might have preferred to hold in reserve for the Prince of Wales, ensuring that Edward's branch of the family remains a permanent and self-sustaining part of the royal landscape. Ultimately, the slimmed-down monarchy is currently being held together by the very people Charles intended to move to the periphery. The legal confirmation of Edward's inheritance is more than a financial victory. It is a recognition of his new essential role in a family that is running out of active members. This shift has forced the king to adapt his vision, proving that the law of necessity often triumphs over the plans of a sovereign. It is a transition that marks the end of the allowance era and the beginning of a more formalized, contract-like relationship between the king and his working siblings. As the inner circle shrinks, could a centuries-old trust fund be the very thing that saves Edward's branch of the family tree? Queen Mother's Mark. The most secretive layer of the royal family's financial architecture involves a series of trusts established not by Queen Elizabeth, but by her mother, the late Queen Mother, in 1994. While most public focus remains on the king's inheritance, legal experts have recently confirmed that these trusts reached a critical maturation point in early 2026. At the time of their creation, the Queen Mother placed an estimated £19 million into a fund for her great-grandchildren and her younger children, strategically bypassing the direct line of succession. This was a move intended to provide a financial buffer for those who would not benefit from the immense revenues of the Duchy of Cornwall, which is reserved exclusively for the Prince of Wales. For Prince Edward, the recent activation of these specific legal instruments has provided a level of liquid wealth that Charles cannot claim or redistribute. The legal brilliance of these trusts lies in their discretionary nature, which has long allowed the royal family to keep the exact payouts out of the public record and away from the reach of the taxman. Under British law, assets held in trust for more than 7 years before the donor's death are generally exempt from inheritance tax. Because the Queen Mother survived until 2002, these funds have been growing for over 3 decades, compounded by sophisticated offshore investments and property stakes. Recent confirmations from Edward's legal advisors suggest that the Duke of Edinburgh has now gained full access to his share of this legacy. This influx of capital is what allowed Edward to maintain his residence at Bagshot Park, a massive 57-room mansion, without relying on a monthly stipend from the king's privy purse. For King Charles, the existence of these mature trusts complicates the slimmed-down agenda. Charles's primary leverage over his family has always been the purse strings of the Duchy of Lancaster. By controlling the money, he controls the behavior of the royals.
The Queen has decided, with the couple's agreement, that any children they might have should not be given the style of his or her Royal Highness, but will have courtesy titles, sons or daughters of an earl.
However, the Queen Mother's foresight created a parallel financial power structure. By ensuring that Edward and his children, Louise and James, were beneficiaries of an independent trust, she effectively insulated them from any future attempts by the reigning sovereign to consolidate wealth at the expense of the junior branches. This discovery is what has reportedly shocked palace insiders. The realization that the Queen Mother and Queen Elizabeth worked in tandem to ensure Edward's financial autonomy was legally ironclad long before Charles took the throne. This legacy acts as a silent check on the king's authority. While Charles holds the titles and the crown properties, Edward holds a private treasury that requires no royal sign-off. This financial independence allows Edward to continue his work with the Duke of Edinburgh's award and other charitable endeavors with a level of stability that other members of the family, such as Prince Andrew, no longer possess. It is a vivid reminder that in the world of the Windsors, the most powerful legal moves are often those made 30 years in advance. The Bagshot Park Covenant. While the headlines focus on the transfer of liquid assets, the most significant legal fortification of Prince Edward's status involves his primary residence, Bagshot Park. Located just miles from Windsor Castle, this sprawling, Grade 2 listed mansion has been Edward's home since his marriage in 1999. Historically, royal residences are subject to the grace and favor of the sitting monarch, a status that has famously left other family members, most notably the Duke of York, vulnerable to eviction or relocation. However, Edward's lawyers have confirmed a starkly different legal reality for the Duke of Edinburgh. In 2026, details emerged regarding a masterful 150-year lease extension Edward secured through the Crown Estate, a move that effectively places his family's security beyond the direct reach of King Charles's restructuring plans. The news within the palace corridors stemmed from the revelation that this lease is not a traditional royal arrangement, but a commercial-style covenant. Unlike the informal agreements that govern other royal properties, Edward's lease was negotiated with a foresight that anticipated a future slimmed-down monarchy. By paying an upfront premium, estimated at several £1 million, and committing to extensive restoration costs, Edward transformed his home into a legally protected fortress. This means that while King Charles may technically be the landlord of the Crown Estate, he lacks the legal mechanism to reclaim Bagshot Park for other uses or to pressure Edward into a smaller property. For a king who has made the reallocation of royal real estate a centerpiece of his reign, finding a sibling with an unbreakable 150-year claim was a significant legal hurdle. This property independence is the physical manifestation of Edward's broader strategy. In the high-stakes chess match of royal inheritance, land is the ultimate queen piece. By securing Bagshot Park for the next century and a half, Edward hasn't just protected his own lifestyle. He has established a permanent seat for his branch of the family. Legal experts point out that this lease survives the transition of monarchs, meaning it will remain valid through the reigns of King Charles and eventually King William. This long-term stability is a rarity in the royal family, where housing is often used as a tool for discipline or reward. Edward's legal team has successfully depoliticized his residency, proving that in the modern era, a well-drafted contract can be more powerful than a crown. As the lines between personal homes and state property become increasingly scrutinized, how far will the law go to protect a prince from his own king? The forensic audit of the Privy Purse. The most recent and perhaps most disruptive development in this unfolding story is the confirmation of a forensic audit of the Privy Purse and its relationship to the Queen's private funds. For decades, the boundaries between the income King Charles received as Prince of Wales via the Duchy of Cornwall and the private wealth held by Queen Elizabeth II were professionally managed but privately contested. Following the Queen's death, Charles moved quickly to consolidate these accounts under his new sovereign authority. However, Edward's lawyers have recently confirmed the existence of specific codicils, legal additions to a will, that earmark a percentage of the Privy Purse's historical surplus for the younger siblings. These funds, which Charles reportedly claimed were his by right of the crown, are now being legally redirected to Edward. This is not a simple dispute over pocket money. It is a battle over the surplus generated by the monarch's private estates over the last 30 years. Edward's legal representatives have argued that under the late Queen's final instructions, these funds were never intended to be absorbed into the King's general fund. Instead, they were designated as a working royal indemnity, a private pool of capital meant to ensure that those who serve the crown are never entirely at the mercy of the sovereign's personal approval. The confirmation that these funds are being released to Edward marks a pivotal shift in royal power dynamics. It suggests that even the king's primary source of private income, the Duchy of Lancaster, is subject to the specific, legally binding legacies of his mother. This financial transparency is unprecedented in royal history. While the king's lawyers have fought to keep the monarchy's finances as private as possible, the necessity of settling these internal claims has forced a forensic look at the books. What they found was a meticulous paper trail left by the Queen, ensuring that her favorite son as Edward was often described in his youth, was protected from the aggressive cost-cutting measures of the new reign. This revelation has caused a stir not because of the amount of money involved, but because of the intent it reveals. It shows a queen who was fully aware of the future tensions her death would cause and who used every legal tool at her disposal to maintain a balance of power between her children. With the financial firewalls now firmly in place, what does this new legal landscape mean for the future of the British monarchy? The future of the firm, a new balance of power. The legal confirmations surrounding Prince Edward's inheritance do more than just settle a family account. They redefine the power structure of the British monarchy for the next generation. For decades, the House of Windsor operated under a centralized model where the sovereign held absolute control over both the narrative and the treasury. However, the emergence of Edward's legally protected mini-estate, comprising the Edinburgh Life Peerage, the Bagshot Park Covenant, and the matured Queen Mother trusts, signals a shift toward a more federalized monarchy. Charles may wear the crown, but the legal work of the last 3 years has ensured that his siblings are no longer mere subsidiaries of his reign, but independent entities with their own secured legacies. This issue to the system actually provides the monarchy with a much-needed layer of resilience. By having a branch of the family that is financially self-sufficient and legally anchored, the firm is better protected against the volatility of political changes or shifts in the sovereign grant. Edward's lawyers have essentially created a blueprint for how working royals can exist in a modern, scrutinized world through transparent legal contracts rather than vague royal tradition. This ensures that the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh can continue their high-volume service to the public without being used as pawns in the ongoing debate over the cost of the royal family. As we look toward the future, the relationship between King Charles and Prince Edward will likely be seen as the new gold standard for royal cooperation.
King Charles isn't thrilled with his youngest brother, Prince Edward. King Charles III and Prince Edward are united by one common goal, and that's service to the crown.
The tension of 2023 and 2024 has given way to a stable, formalized partnership. Charles has his streamlined core, and Edward has the legal certainty required to support that core. While the headlines may continue to chase stories of shocks and battles, the reality is a masterclass in estate planning. The House of Windsor has survived for 1,000 years, not just through tradition, but through its ability to adapt its legal and financial foundations to meet the challenges of each new era. The resolution of these internal financial and legal matters marks a significant turning point for the Windsors. What began as a series of whispered rumors about succession and sibling rivalry has evolved into a sophisticated restructuring of the family's private economy. By moving away from a model based on royal whim and toward one grounded in ironclad legal trusts and commercial covenants, the Duke of Edinburgh has set a new precedent for survival. This strategic independence doesn't weaken the king's authority. Rather, it fortifies the institution by ensuring its most active members are not vulnerable to the shifting winds of public policy or internal palace politics. As the dust settles on the late Queen's estate, the narrative is no longer one of conflict, but of calculated continuity. The British public may see only the grand ceremonies and the titles, but the real strength of the modern monarchy lies in the meticulous paperwork and the foresight of those who came before. Prince Edward's secure position is a testament to a family that understands that to remain relevant, they must be as legally robust as they are traditionally symbolic. The shock has passed, leaving behind a more resilient and modern version of the firm. In the end, what Charles claimed and what Edward inherited have merged into a singular goal: the survival and stability of the crown. What do you think of this royal controversy? Subscribe to the channel for the next deep dive.